Hey everybody, David here, and today I want to do a video on how to watch the James Bond franchise in chronological order. Because let's face it, with 20 plus movies, it probably is a little intimidating to know where to start. First of all, I just want to say, with any movie, any good movie, you can start wherever you want. Because a good movie is something that's easy to follow. You should be able to come in the first one and easy to understand it all. You should be able to come in the 20th film and easy to understand it all. And guess what? James Bond isn't a complicated franchise because most of the movies really do stand on their own without you having to watch all of them in a chronological order. But just in case you are curious and you do want to, you can do it this way if you want. I've watched it in chronological order, and it's pretty simple. Why? Because it's the actual release date order and how they were released. Now, there's two different timelines in the James Bond movie verse, if you want to call it that. There's the original timeline, which is the first 20 films, which I always looked at as one Bond character. Even though how come he stays the same age throughout all his films? It's better not to ask too many questions on that. Maybe he's found unicorn blood and he's been drinking it, and that's why he stays somewhere around his 30s, 40s. And then there's the Daniel Craig films, which are completely on their own. And the James Bond movies are hard to know which one was the first one, which was the second, third, fourth. You could know a little bit if you know the actors that took over those roles. That gives you a little bit of a hint, but even then, it's still maybe a little complicated because none of the James Bond movies are numbered. Well, withstanding 007 being in the title. But yes, let us start with movie number one. The first movie you might want to start off with is the very first Bond movie, Dr. No. The Sean Connery films are somewhat connected to one another for the most part, using the Spectre organization as the antagonists throughout some of the Sean Connery films. There's only one film that doesn't really use Spectre as the organization behind the shadows, and we'll get to it. But yes, Dr. No works for Spectre, and so starts the Spectre thread of films that you'll see in these Sean Connery ones, and one movie that's not a Sean Connery film, but I'll get to that. Second film is From Russia with Love. This was the second James Bond movie. The third one is Goldfinger. Goldfinger is the one that, as far as I'm concerned or know of, has nothing to do with Spectre. That was he goes off and does a separate mission not connected to Spectre. I don't remember it having any Spectre connections anyway. So, and Goldfinger is considered one of the better older films in the franchise. So that's definitely a must-watch for hardcore Bond fans. Next, you want to go to Thunderball. Thunderball is the fourth one starring Sean Connery. After that, you want to go to You Only Live Twice. Now, You Only Live Twice finally reveals who the mastermind behind Spectre is. He's technically revealed in From Russia with Love, but you don't actually see his face. You only see his cat and his bald head. His white furry cat. You only see him from behind. It's You Only Live Twice that actually reveals who he is. And a lot of you people who might have watched Austin Powers, that franchise, there's a familiar character that you'll be like, hey, is that? It's not, but remember, the Austin Powers movies are a spoof of the older James Bond films, specifically of the Sean Connery and Roger Moore films. Moving on, you have On Her Majesty's Secret Service. This is the one that stars George Lazenby as James Bond, his one and only appearance as James Bond. Blofeld is still the villain in the film, but he might look a little different. And there's a behind-the-scenes explanation that apparently it was supposed to be revealed that Blofeld and Bond both get plastic surgery, but for some reason it was taken out of the film, and they just don't recognize each other at first, or at least I think one of them don't recognize the other, and that was supposed to be the explanation. So whatever, moving on. The seventh film in the James Bond franchise is Diamonds Are Forever. Apparently this is the first Bond movie my mom watched. At least that's what she told me when she finally moved to Canada with her family, from Portugal to Canada. Diamonds Are Forever has Sean Connery returning one more time to the franchise, and well, he returns one more time after this, but this is his last official appearance. There is one more movie called Never Say Never Again, where he did return, and it was a remake of Thunderball, a movie that he already had done, and but it was done by a different company who got the rights to the novel of the same name, so they Thunderball, but changed it to Never Say Never Again. Why did they remake that one? Why with Sean Connery again? Who knows? But whatever. Okay. So that one is the only Bond movie that you don't have to worry about. Diamonds Are Forever is the final film from Sean Connery officially. So there you go. Moving on to the next Bond film, Live and Let Die. That is Roger Moore's first film into the franchise. So there you go. Then you want to move on to The Man with the Golden Gun. This is one of my personal favorites of the older James Bond movies. It stars Christopher Lee as the villain, going up against Roger Moore. You then want to go into The Spy Who Loved Me, Roger Moore's third outing as James Bond. His fourth outing is a weird one, Moonraker. I think it's an okay film. It did seem weird that Bond was going into space. It's kind of reminding people of the Fast and the Furious franchise right now, which just announced it's going into space. They did this because the space movies like Star Wars were big at the time, and Superman was coming out, the original Superman with Christopher Reeves, as well as a Star Trek movie that came, I believe, during that year, 1979. That's why they wanted James Bond to go into space, because, well, space movies were getting popular. Why don't we do it too? It was a weird choice, but I think it's pretty cool. And you kind of see some of that in Austin Powers and The Spy Who Shagged Me. I think that was the second one. That's where Austin Powers goes into space as well. It was making fun of Moonraker a little bit. Moving on, his next film, which I believe his fifth outing as James Bond, Roger Moore starred in For Your Eyes Only. Then Octopussy, which is a title that probably wouldn't have gotten away with today. Then you go into A View to a Kill, which, is that the one with Christopher Walken? It might have been. I think A View to the Kill is with Christopher Walken as the villain. It might have been that one or For Your Eyes Only. I don't remember. I believe it's A View to a Kill. So, but that was his final appearance as James Bond. He did the most James Bond movies, if you don't count Sean Connery's unofficial film, Never Say Never Again. Roger Moore is the one who did the most Bond films, starring in 7 James Bond movies. Sean Connery, I think, only was in 6, if you don't count that unofficial one. We then go into the Timothy Dalton James Bond movies. His first one was The Living Daylights, which came out in 1987. I actually like Timothy Dalton as James Bond, and I think The Living Daylights was his best of the two that he did. His second film was License to Kill in 1989. They didn't bring him back, not because they didn't like him, but because they were having a tough time on knowing what to adapt next, because all the first 16 James Bond movies were either based off novels or short stories based off the character that Ian Fleming wrote a long time ago. So we then move on to the 17th James Bond film, which is based on, technically it was an original idea, GoldenEye, that got spun off into a very popular video game for, I believe, N64, which I used to play a lot as well. Who in my generation never played GoldenEye? It was one of the most awesome games back in the 90s. We then go on to the 18th, and this is the first movie, by the way. GoldenEye is the first one that starred Pierce Brosnan as the character. We then go on to Pierce Brosnan's second film, Tomorrow Never Dies. Then The World Is Not Enough, which was his third film. And then in 2002, his final film, Pierce Brosnan, with Halle Berry as Jinx, which they were going to spin Halle Berry off into her own film, Die Another Day, which also has a little cameo from Madonna. So just a little fun trivia for you. So that was the first 20 films from Sean Connery to, I guess, George Lazenby to Roger Moore to Timothy Dalton and Pierce Brosnan. That's all one Bond. And what connects them all, the Sean Connery films in particular, and George Lazenby, is those films have the Spectre organization in it. And Blofeld also returns in one of the Roger Moore films later on. Also, Bond does reference in one of the Roger Moore films, I believe the one with Blofeld making a cameo, as well as one of the Timothy Dalton films, do reference a tragedy that happened in Bond's life. Without trying to ruin it, I don't want to spoil it. It happens on Her Majesty's Secret Service, the George Lazenby one. Something tragic happens that does get referenced in a Roger Moore film and a Timothy Dalton film. The Pierce Brosnan films can stand on their own without watching all those ones, but there are some references, a lot of references in the 20th Bond film, Die Another Day, to the previous films. As well as in GoldenEye, Bond does reference that there is a new M in charge. That's when Judi Dench takes over as the new M. And Pierce Brosnan's James Bond wasn't too happy with the fact that it was a woman being the new M. Because in the previous films, M was always portrayed as a male. And so to have Judi Dench take over and him even reference the fact that he wasn't respecting her in the beginning, you kind of see why, because he was so used to a male being in that position. But then obviously he gains respect for Judi Dench's M, and they grow a bond as the franchise continues on with Pierce Brosnan. But then you backtrack a little bit, because guess what? The Daniel Craig movies are an all-new Bond, because Casino Royale, which is based off the very first novel of James Bond, is an origin film for Bond. Now, some people are thinking, wait, if it was an origin novel, why didn't they do that novel first? They actually did do an adaptation of Casino Royale with a different actor playing Bond back in the 60s, I believe. But it was a TV movie. And the Broccoli family didn't have the rights to that novel at the time. Now they did, so they decided to backtrack since reboots were becoming a thing because of Batman Begins in 2005. That's how in 2006 we got Casino Royale, and that's the Bond franchise that we're currently in. And these are the films in the order. So after Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace takes place literally right after the events of Casino Royale. And then Skyfall is a perfect roundup to that trilogy. Spectre, funny enough, you heard that name before. Spectre was the organization in the older Bond films with Sean Connery and George Lazenby. They decided, since this was a reboot, let's bring that back. Does a certain villain make a cameo or make an appearance in this movie? I'll leave that for you to go and check out. And finally, No Time to Die is the most recent Bond films. So that will be Daniel Craig's 5th outing as James Bond. Almost getting there with Sean Connery, but passing Pierce Brosnan at least. So that's pretty cool. To me, Daniel Craig is the best Bond. I think he's had the best films as James Bond. That's just me. But then again, Casino Royale was my first Bond movie that I really was interested in checking out. I wasn't really a huge Bond fan before Daniel Craig, but I became one when Casino Royale came out. I was even playing poker at the time. I think I was old enough. But with that being said, guys, I hope this helps you. I hope you guys are interested in this franchise. This is a cool franchise to watch from not just a fan's perspective, if you are getting into James Bond. It's also on a film fan's perspective, because it is kind of cool going through all the James Bond movies from the 60s and onwards, in the 70s and 80s and 90s. This is a franchise that has gone on for so long. You can see movie making evolve throughout all these films if you watch them in the release date order. I would even say start with Daniel Craig, and start with Sean Connery. And even though it doesn't connect to the Daniel Craig movies, watch the Daniel Craig movies right after the first 20 films, because you still see the evolution of films evolve in terms of action, in terms of how movie making was made, on how the cinematography was done, all that stuff, special effects, how that was eventually added. It's kind of cool going to see the old Sean Connery films, how different the choreography was for action sequences, and then how they progressed later on, because Bond is known for the action scenes, especially with the Daniel Craig movies being a little bit more raw with the action. It is interesting seeing how that all evolves, including car chases and so forth. So I would recommend to watch all of them. I think just from a film fan perspective, it's interesting to watch all of these films. So with that being said, guys, I hope this helps you, and I hope you guys like this video. Please subscribe to my channel and share this video with anybody that wants to get into James Bond movies, because I think even though the character is old, he has stayed relevant throughout the years for a reason. And with that being said, until next time, take care.